Hello, everybody. A very warm welcome to you joining me here today. As always, I hope you are doing absolutely fantastic. Today on the presentation, I am going to talk about the state of cybersecurity in the education industry and touch upon the relationship that the sector has with law and policy. We're going to go over the critical infrastructure and key resources in the U.S. government, otherwise known as CICARs. Talk a little bit about the education facilities subsector, the condition of cybersecurity in the education subsector, facilities subsector, where the laws and policies fit in, and vulnerabilities caused by human factors and behaviors. So, critical infrastructure and key resources. What does that mean? Those are, in the United States, it's essentially a boilerplate term that refers to the assets and the essential services of the U.S. government that are indispensable to the nation's security, public health, and safety, and economic vitality, and overall way of life. There are 16 CICARs whose assets, systems, and networks, whether physical or virtual, are considered so vital to the U.S. that their incapacitation or destruction would have a debilitating effect on security, national economic security, national public health, or safety, or any combination thereof. And that's established by PPD 21, the Presidential Policy Directive number 21. Now, of the 16 CICARs, is one of them being government facilities sector. And the government facilities sector is a designation that includes a variety of buildings within the United States and overseas that are owned or leased by federal, state, local, and tribal governments. Many of these facilities are made available for public use, while others are closed to public access since they house sensitive and classified information or materials, processes, and equipment. Interestingly, this sector also includes cyber elements that contribute to the protection of sector assets. For example, access control systems and closed-circuit television systems, as well as individuals that perform essential functions or possess tactical, operational, or strategic knowledge. Within the government facilities sector, as designated by the National Infrastructure Protection Plan, is the education facilities subsector. Now, this subsector comprises of, or is composed of, schools, universities, business and trade schools, and it includes schools that are, or facilities rather, that are both owned by the government and by private sector entities. No surprise to you, I'm sure. These institutions provide instruction and training over a wide variety of subjects, as defined by the U.S. Department of Labor and the 2008 Bureau Labor Statistics document. Moving along. The condition of cybersecurity in the education subsector is a problem. Data from Verizon's Data Breach Investigation Report of 2017 and also 2018 suggest major vulnerabilities spread throughout the subsector. DDoS attacks still represent the majority threat to educational institutions, and that composes 50% of all security incidents. This in addition to hacking and social engineering, malware, social engineering and hacking, social engineering and malware attacks, and social engineering, hacking, and malware attacks. In the first half of 2017, 32 million records were compromised. That represents nearly 13% of all data breaches, not just in the education subsector, of all the SICARs. And part of the reason that the education industry is such a poor performer is, number one, the available data diversity of students and staff, combined with substandard cyber defenses. So you have very, very attractive, comprehensive levels of data and information, which create value for those records on the black market, as well as, doors being unlocked, essentially. And an article in 2016 found that a cyber attack at the University of Central Florida exposed over 60,000 current and former students to identity theft, and a little bit more recently, a attack at the University of California, Berkeley, exposed 80,000 students and their records to possible financial fraud. After a 6-month survey done by Security Scorecard in 2018 that had surveyed 17 industries. Now, these are not SICARs, these are just 17 industries ranging from food, energy, retail, construction, pharmaceutical, transportation, government, nonprofit, technology, entertainment, legal, manufacturing, telecom, healthcare, information services, and education. That it did education did come in at the very end as a poorest performer, and their criteria in their survey included surveying DNS security, network security, and application security. The three major challenges that are standing in the way of improving security in the education level or education sector are the frequency and evolution of cyber attacks, right? The limited IT resources that are available, both financially available. Actually, it's really stemmed from, I believe, being financially available, right? There's just not enough money in the education sector to entice IT professionals to go. A lot of schools, their funding is being cut. As we've seen recently, funding going towards the Department of Education has been dramatically reduced. And lastly, a lack of a healthy culture of cyber awareness, essentially creating an amount of good hygiene for students and teachers to practice when they are in the education facilities. So we are seeing more and more that there has been a lack of established policies, cybersecurity dedicated policies in the education sector. Now this comes from policies that are developed internally, as well as in general. Well, and now this has been improving the laws surrounding cybersecurity and the punishment associated with committing cyber crimes. One of the Rather, some suggest that because the education sector is a subsector, that it doesn't really get enough attention that it needs, which is interesting because in a way it creates a paradox that, given that education establishments and the industry at large are, you know, uh, the nurseries of the future economy of the country, and in our case, in this particular program, Marymount being a nursery of future cybersecurity warriors, uh, educational institutions themselves are relatively varying levels of cesspools of cyber vulnerabilities and a poor digital hygiene. Uh, I'm not suggesting that our university falls into that category, but there are a lot of universities that do have IT security and or cybersecurity programs, and they're falling victim to cyber attacks. So perhaps one of the answers might be increasing budget dedicated to the development of or the additional development of educational institutions, adding in additional IT resources, or having the government offer those down to the educational institutions. That might bring about a more favorable dividend. Which then brings me to our next slide, which highlights the vulnerabilities that are caused by human factors and behaviors. According to a 2017 report done by Kaspersky, 57% of businesses assume that their IT security will be breached and that files will be compromised. 52% admit that their biggest vulnerability are their employees. They know this. And in fact, you can see here at the exhibit to the right that the top three fears relating to cybersecurity, the top three cybersecurity fears relate directly to human factors. Number one, coming in at 47%, that employees sharing inappropriate data via mobile devices was the greatest worry, followed by the physical loss of mobile devices, exposing the organization to risk at 46%, and the improper use of IT resources by employees, coming in at 44%. These vulnerabilities are further amplified by the impact of the concept of BYOD, or bring your own device. This ideology is now spread to everywhere. Everyone brings their own device. You bring your smartphone to class. You bring your own laptop. You bring maybe an iPad. People have 2 and 3 devices. That's the normal now. And this is not just applicable to students, but to teachers as well. This then creates an added vulnerability, referring back to, or recalling rather, that those earlier fears of having, human employees being the greatest worry for businesses. In that, not only are your employees posing risks to you, in a sense, they themselves can share inappropriate data, expose data, improperly using the improper use of, let's say, school IT resources. But now they're bringing their own devices, their own unsecured devices that potentially have malware or trojans or any type of exploitable vulnerability on those computers. Right? We don't know. There's no metal detector for computers that are coming in, and as there shouldn't be. But this adds, this further complicates the matter, as it provides a vehicle for data to get out of the organization. Let's say data that should not, that data that is confidential or sensitive, that needs to remain in the organization, can potentially get out. So that's where having or creating appropriate policies comes into play. Not only just establishing those policies, but also respecting those policies and reviewing them and making sure that your employees are happy with them. People look into things in terms of how it benefits themselves. And so if we don't treat someone or something with respect, it can backfire on us. Which brings me to my closing here. It was said many years ago in an ambassador's writing that by treating someone poorly, you can create a terrorist in your own home. Now you might be thinking, how does this apply to cybersecurity? How does this apply to laws and policies? It applies. It applies to vulnerabilities caused by human factors and behavior, in the sense that if we are mistreating our employees, not giving them the appropriate guidelines to adhere to create a foundation for them to build their careers out of, they can turn back on their organization that they thought they had joined, that they developed a affinity for and an allegiance for. And further, this quote can be applied to the way that the government treats or regards the education facilities subsector. By giving someone the short end of the stick, whether it's a individual person or an entity or a sector, they're not going to perform as well. You leave them in the corner, well, they're going to be left behind, and then they're going to be performing in a poor manner that is in violation of established norms or standards or guidelines. So all these things are very, very important when considering the condition of cybersecurity in the education subsector, but also in any sector. When we lose respect for the subject in front of us, the situation can very easily turn around, and before you know it, you'll be in a complicated situation that you wish you weren't in. A complicated situation that was potentially preventable from the start. I want to thank you very much for joining me here on this presentation, and hope you have a great day. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.